Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to come before you today after finishing up a very long day of meetings and calls and working from home. I wanted to just share a couple thoughts with you regarding assessing your value proposition. Had a couple conversations today that resonated around where we are relative to the coronavirus crisis response from a lot of organizations, as well as where we are around the country. A lot of people being laid off, unemployed, furloughed as a result of this. And I think that it's a good time to assess your value proposition. So I wanted to just have a brief Facebook Live and hopefully engaging discussion as well, if it leads that way, but wanted to really talk around the subject again of evaluating your value proposition or assessing your value proposition. Good afternoon, everybody that's joining, and thank you for taking the time to join on. But as it has hit the country and the world, the coronavirus has had a direct impact on organizations, individuals, households, and just really the economy overall. And anytime when you go through a crisis like this, it does hit you hard. It hits you in an unexpected way, because I don't think any of us, no matter whether or not we are still employed or in an unemployed or furloughed or laid off state, expected to have a financial hit and or impact the way that the coronavirus has hit most of our, if not all of our households. So in a couple meetings and conversations I've had today, the theme had just been continued to come up around our value proposition. If you've been paying attention, many companies, particularly, and I'll talk about the Cincinnati region in our market here, have gone into looking at their operations and looking at where they are in terms of their staffing, and have moved towards furloughing and or laying off a number of people and or closing facilities or certain areas of their organizations, which again, no one anticipated this, and I don't think any organization wanted to be in this space intentionally. So part of what I believe as organizations or as individuals we need to look at is, after this crisis is over, because it will end, not going back to the way that we are or were accustomed to doing business. I believe that we need to be in an evaluative perspective or space that says, how should we do business differently now that we've experienced this crisis? I know, for example, at my organization, that's what we're looking at, the new norm. And I continue to say that to my executive team, as well as individuals that we're partnering with. How do we look at what the crisis has taught us to do things differently? And then when I dial that back into my own personal experience and what I'm sharing and hopefully imparting to you today, how do we take a look at what the crisis is teaching us to do things differently? How we meet, how we interact, how we budget, how we spend, how we do what we do should all be impacted in a positive way as we come out of the crisis. And I think that we're able to do things in a way that's, one, more collaborative. I said in another Facebook Live that relationships are being forged that we need not discard after the crisis has ended. But what are those relationships and our interdependency on one another teaching us that we need to carry forward? And that goes from the church, that goes to the home, that goes to the organizations that we work for and partner with. I think that there's a lot of opportunity that we can learn from, that we need to carry forward from this. One of the things I believe that God has truly given us in this crisis mode and stay at home and social distancing space that we're in is the gift of time. And the gift of time to be able to use that gift of time to do these types of assessments and do these types of reflections in effort to build a better you, a better home, a better community, and a better world as we come out of this crisis. So the challenge that I give to myself and to all of us today is, what are the things that you could be doing differently, that you're learning during this time, that you need to assess in order to create your value proposition. Most of the companies right now, and I can't speak to everyone, but from some of the things that I've seen, are looking at how they're cutting from a financial perspective. And rightfully so. Most organizations, again, who might be losing revenue and or losing money and or projecting losses, are going to look at where they cut and how they cut from a financial perspective. But to that end, as you look at the individuals that are in these departments or divisions or entities within your organization, what are, from a personal perspective, your value proposition to ensure that if they have to have that tough conversation with you, you can demonstrate irreplaceable value to your organization. Many of us can't answer that question right now, unfortunately. But what I implore you to do is, if you are still employed, and thank God for those of us and those of you who are, but if you are still employed, prepare to have that conversation should your organization come to you and say, we need to let you go temporarily or long term, and be able to counter that with, I understand, but can you afford to lose me today? And having that type of responsiveness and or challenge back to those who might be that you report to or that you're working with or for, that is a different perspective on how you demonstrate your value to an organization. Some examples of that is, the area of diversity. I am a diversity practitioner, and by education, training, and experience, as well as through previous roles that I've held and had for organizations. But we all know that in most of these types of dire situations, diversity and the supplier diversity in certain areas that deal with cultural awareness and differences within the organizations are the first areas to be cut. Reality. And where you have to, if you're in that space, identify what your value proposition is through results. You want to make sure that you're not just doing stuff in an organization, or the busy person in the organization, or the one that the organization has leveraged to be the face of certain things that in most cases don't demonstrate a prioritized value as it might relate to clinical care or operations or other things that your organization may have as a higher priority than what you do. But how you are able to demonstrate that irreplaceable value is by being able to be strategic, but also getting results and measuring your results, chronicling your results, and documenting your results, because that expands far beyond what your role might demonstrate in terms of job description, duties, and responsibilities. But when you get results for an organization, those are the things that are measurable, that help the organization either go to another level, resolve issues, and or get things done that has now moved the organization forward in some degree or another. And that is also what creates your value proposition. That's also what separates you from other people and or areas within the organization, that, again, when these type of evaluative processes go through, the organization sees that even though they may need to eliminate a role or move your role out of the organizational structure right now due to financial crises, leaders, meaning those who are making those decisions, may look at you and your value much different in terms of retention and or moving you into a space where your additional skills and skill sets can be applied in other ways. And most of us who are in either leadership and or those aspiring to be in leadership should be looking at that very, very, very seriously, in effort to try and ensure that when those tough times and tough conversations need to be held, that we're on the other side of that conversation. And not saying that just because you've identified that and demonstrated that you will not get caught up in some of those changes. But what it does is it separates you from everybody else. And what it also does is it gives the organization an opportunity to look at you as someone that is irreplaceable and or a value add to the future of the organization, and allows you to be able to say, can you afford to lose me today? But if that answer is No, we can't afford to lose you, but we still had to let you go. That's the organization's loss and not yours. And, again, in all of this, we still trust God for whatever the outcome is, so that our peace is not in the position, but our peace is in the Lord who gave us the opportunity to be in that position. So I encourage us today. Again, I didn't want to have a long Facebook Live conversation with you, but it was just on my heart and on my spirit to share that with you, because it was a constant theme today as I was checking in with and meeting with a number of folks, and also checking on people within my circle to make sure that they were okay because of the impending and also implemented changes that I know about in my particular area. So I thought that this conversation might be valuable to someone out there today that needed to hear the message of encouragement that, one, this is a tough time for everybody and everyone is going through something, but it's not the end of the world, and the Lord is in control. But ultimately, what we are in control of is creating that value proposition for ourselves. And, I've had mentors and people share and impart that with me over the years. And I'm very appreciative because I'm now able to share that same guidance and or counsel with you from a different role and perspective. And where these things make sense is where it's inarguable when you can drive results. It's inarguable when you can point to how you've helped an organization move forward. It's not self-serving when you can say, here's what I was tasked to do. I did that, but I've also done this in terms of making sure that I was able to use other skills and skill sets outside of what I was hired to do to help the organization move forward around the mission and or metrics that were important to the organization. And I think that, again, it ultimately carves a niche out for you that separates the men from the boys or the women from the girls, and it allows you to be able to put yourself in a position where you do become indispensable. And if an organization values that and sees that, no matter what changes occur, you will always be able to maintain and sustain a role within that organization, or position yourself for a role somewhere else where someone else does see that value in you. And it's not so much about maintaining employment, but it's about being able to always find a job and always be able to be used within your area of experience and expertise to add value to changing the world. So that's what I wanted to share with you all today. I pray that it was a blessing. And for those of you who may have missed the beginning part of this, I will post this to my Facebook page and also on my other social media outlets. But I just wanted to share something that I thought that people may need to hear as a point of encouragement, but also as a point of challenge to help you maintain your value during a time where we tie our value to a job or a role. And in closing, I want to reemphasize something I posted the other day. You are not your job. When I was working for the State Department of Health in Pennsylvania years ago, and was laid off for 2.5 years after that experience, one of the things that I was continually encouraged about, that I was always who I was, regardless of the job I had or the titles that I've held. And many of us, particularly men, sometimes get depressed when we lose our job or our job changes or something like that occurs in our lives. And I want to encourage men, women, and everybody that you are not your job. You are who God says that you are. And that is not tied to a role or a title or a degree or a salary or any of those things. God made you who you are because that's who He created you to be. But we sometimes, because of our social status and or other things, have that unbalanced relative to when we or any of those things change. We lose a job or something shifts, and particularly in a time like this, is impacting us all. When those changes occur, we think that we're less of a person, or we think that our value has shifted because of the shift in the circumstances surrounding what's going on right now. But again, let me encourage you to always remain faithful to what God says you are and who God says you are, versus what the job or the organization now sees you as, or may have even discarded in terms of your role with them and how you used to be who you were as a VP or a director or a supervisor, manager, frontline person, or whoever you may have been to that organization. That does not define you, and that does not make you who God says that you are. But be encouraged to know that, again, jobs, employment will come and go, and things will change relative to that, but never let that change who God says that you are. Be encouraged, and I would love to also thank everyone who is essential to making sure that we have the ability and capacity to do what we do every day. Our frontline healthcare workers who are dealing with this crisis head on, all of our essential support roles that support those healthcare workers, all of our grocery folks and retail people, and our truck drivers, our processors, our factory workers, everyone that's keeping the country and the world moving right now during a time when we all need to stay at home and be safe and stop the spread of the virus. I am ever grateful to you. I also am an essential person. And again, thank all of my team, my organization that provide mental health, behavioral health, addiction treatment services, as well as opioid treatment provider services to the area in which I live. And again, thank you to all who are doing everything that they can to manage through a process that we've never experienced before. Thank you for your service. Thank you to the military. Thank you to the National Guard. Thank you to our state government and federal leadership that are trying to do their very best to manage through a situation that's been unprecedented. But love to you all. And again, if you missed a piece of this, please go back and watch it. And again, I encourage you to challenge yourself to assess your value proposition, and also challenge yourself to look at what you can do with your hands and with your mind and with the resources that God has given you outside of what you may not be able to do now because you can't get out the house. There's a purpose and intent for why God slowed us down, and pay close attention to what that may mean for you individually, but for us collectively as a community as we come out of this. Much love to y'all. Thank you very much for watching. And again, be blessed and encouraged. Take care.